Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Moonee Ponds in the heart of my Maribyrnong electorate. It's fantastic to be home today with my family. Last night was an historic night. The Labor Party is most certainly back. I want to pay tribute again to the work of tens of thousands of volunteers, and I want to pay tribute to the millions of Australians who voted for Labor's agenda of jobs, education and Medicare. We now need to have some patience. The public have spoken. We're not sure who's finally won. We should now allow our very professional Australian Electoral Commission to do their job and count the votes. What I'm very sure of is that whilst we don't know who the winner was, there's clearly one loser: Malcolm Turnbull's agenda for Australia and his efforts to cut Medicare. We want to make the Parliament, the 45th Parliament, work. I've already been speaking to crossbenchers, some of them. I want to see how we can be constructive and how Labor can implement its program working with the Parliament of Australia to make sure that we save Medicare, take real action on climate change, to make sure that we have a first-class NBN, to make sure that we prioritise Australian jobs, and of course implement the Gonski Schools funding principles. The Labor Party is committed to making this Parliament work, and we certainly look forward to working with all people of goodwill in the 45th Parliament. Happy to take some questions.
Mr. Shorten, do you see a path to Labor securing majority government, or is your only chance negotiating in a hung Parliament?
Well, the Australian people have spoken. We now need to have some patience. We now need to let the AEC count the votes. What I'll also do, and what I promise Australians, is that we will be constructive and that we will work with people of goodwill in the Parliament. It's pretty ironic. Last week, Mr Turnbull was promising rock-solid guarantee for stability. His double dissolution election has delivered anything but stability for his agenda. By contrast, the Labor team, with our agenda, we look forward to working with people because we know that Australians are interested in what Labor was talking about in this election.
Mr. Shorten, what's your message?
Have you spoken to?
Sorry,
Mr. Shorten, what's your message to Anthony Albanese, given reports this morning that he's already jockeying for your job?
Well, first of all, Anthony, Tanya, Stephen Conroy, Penny Wong, Chris Bowen, Tony Burke, Jenny Macklin. I've got a great shadow cabinet. And as I said last night, I wouldn't swap a single one of my colleagues over the last 3 years and their contribution they've made. For myself, I have never been more certain of my leadership than I have this morning.
Mr. Shorten, how do you feel that there are these reports of support from senior right and left figures for Mr Albanese to contest the leadership? How does that make you feel?
I've never been more certain of my leadership position than I am this morning. And again, I just want to record my gratitude to the Labor Party, the broader Labor movement, the volunteers and the individual rank and file trade unionists, my MPs, my hard-working staff. You know, people said 3 years ago the Labor was out for the count. They said 8 weeks ago it was inevitable that Malcolm Turnbull would win the election. There were some in the Conservative columns of some newspapers who were predicting a new era of Turnbull dominance. Well, the Australian people had a different view, and I will keep working hard with the Australian people, just as I have in the last 8 weeks, and my united team. Sorry, go.
Mr Shorten, there have been some suggestions that Malcolm Turnbull was just a little bit too relaxed and perhaps even a little bit cocky going into the election campaign and during those 8 weeks. Do you think that that's actually worked in your favour?
I think Mr Turnbull is seriously out of touch, and his agenda reflected that. Who on earth dreamed up as your core economic plan for Australia a $50 billion tax cut for the big banks and large companies? Why on earth was he so determined to prevent a royal commission into the banking sector? Why on earth did he think it was a good idea to freeze the GP rebate for 6 years, to increase the price of prescription medicine, to cut our bulk billing incentives for blood tests and x-rays, and at the same time fight so hard to keep property speculators and big real estate able to get manifest tax subsidies going forward in the future and give a tax cut for millionaires? Mr Turnbull's agenda was out of touch, and a lot of Australians made that clear yesterday in the ballot booths right across Australia.
Your
Andrew.
time in the Gillard minority government, have you learnt
Do you think you can handle minority government better than those days? And can you out-negotiate Malcolm Turnbull over the next few days to secure the numbers?
The Australian people want to see this parliament work together. Now, we've done what other political parties didn't do. We've outlined a full agenda, a comprehensive set of policies. We'll work with people of goodwill from all political persuasions. Let me be clear, if Malcolm Turnbull could go back to being the old Malcolm Turnbull and stand up on climate change, we could get a deal on climate change in a very short time. If Malcolm Turnbull would go back to being the old Malcolm Turnbull before he was hostage to the right wing of his party, we could sort out marriage equality within 100 days of this election. If Malcolm Turnbull wants to be constructive on infrastructure and depoliticise it, I'm sure we can get things done. And when I look at the crossbenchers, I'm sure they want to be constructive as well. I look forward to the opportunities of the 45th Parliament advocating Labor's program for jobs, education and Medicare, and I look forward to working with people of goodwill right across the political spectrum. What I've done my whole political career is bring people together and get people working together. You can focus on what you disagree on, or you can choose to focus on what we agree on. My style of consensus is let's work together, let's acknowledge we have differences, but let's also work on what we have in common. That's what Australia wants to see. That's what I'm happy to deliver from the Labor point of view. Lisa.
Which crossbenchers have you spoken to today, and can you give us a bit of a flavour of how those conversations went?
Well, I've spoken to some of the crossbenchers, not all. I won't go into every individual conversation, but I get the clear mood from the people I've spoken to. They want to be constructive. They don't want Australia rushing back to the polls. I certainly don't. I think that we owe it to the Australian people to make the decision of the Australian people work. I think that we're clever enough and smart enough and committed enough to this country that we should do everything we can to make this parliament work, and that's certainly what I'll be doing. And the good thing about Labor's position is we've been very upfront with people, and I think a lot of people responded very favourably to our positive agenda.
Mr. Shorten, would you like an
Have you
assurance?
Sorry, I
spoken
might get
to...
someone who hasn't asked the question.
Would you like an assurance from Anthony Albanese that he won't challenge you for the leadership?
Oh, listen, I can only got good things to say about all my colleagues, including Anthony.
Have you spoken to him today?
Well, just one question at a time. I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues right through this campaign, and I've got nothing but good things to say about my entire team. We had a very good infrastructure policy offering, just as we had very good healthcare offerings, very good education offerings. The Labor Party is united. You can look everywhere you want, you can try and hope that the Labor Party sort of veers off course. You're going to be disappointed. My crew understand the importance of unity, never been more certain of my own position, and I think if you want to talk leadership, how are we going with my friends in the Liberal Party? Have we seen Tony Abbott out today? Is Mr Turnbull saying he'll put Tony Abbott in his shadow cabinet? How's it? Do you know now Mr Turnbull's got such a problem? He did a proverbial deal with the political devil, you know, a deal with the right wing of the party. He said, let's dump Tony because I can make it all better again. It didn't happen, did it? Now instead you've got a lot of angry right-wing conservatives who say, well, what was the Turnbull experiment about? He's given them an uncontrollable Senate. He's failed. He's gone to the polls. He's run a very out-of-touch economic policy of just tax cuts for the top end of town. And as a result, there's far fewer Liberals returning to Canberra, courtesy of Malcolm Turnbull. No, I think if you want to look at leadership tension, have a look at the Liberal Party. I might just take two more questions because, like many of you who've been on this 8-week odyssey, I know that there's other things you want to do this Sunday, so maybe I might just ask Lauren.
At the start of this campaign and throughout it, you have ruled out doing deals with the Greens. Is that now a live option, given you do say that you would work with all political persuasions? And are you surprised at these results that we're seeing at the moment? You are ahead, according to the AEC.
Well, we're going to keep to our word. We're not going to form any coalitions or agreements with the Greens, and they understand that. And just like a number of the crossbenchers have said that they've got their issues. But what I'll make also clear is that we're committed to making the 45th Parliament work. Labor has been very clear on what we stand for. If other crossbenchers and parties want to help save Medicare, well, we can work together. If they want to take real action on climate change, we can do this. If they want to build public transport in our great cities, well, that's a good program. If they want to protect penalty rates or deliver a first-class NBN, we can do this together. You know, we're very committed to our platform and policies. I believe there are people of goodwill, and earlier in this press conference I said, if Mr Turnbull would go back to being the centrist that he used to be before he rolled Tony Abbott, I've got no doubt there is some common ground that we can work with them. It shouldn't be beyond the pale of the Liberals to say maybe we need to look at what we can do together with the Labor Party. What Australians want is they want our political leaders to act like leaders, not partisans. I'm here today saying, with a reinvigorated mandate of a united party, with a great policy program, that we're up for the hard work of the Parliament. That's what people expect us to do. And the second part of your question was? Am I surprised that people voted for me? I make a practice of not believing every newspaper editorial I read. I form my own judgments. And my judgments weren't formed about the political conservative editorial papers who said that Malcolm Turnbull was going to win even before people voted. I don't have that degree of telepathy. But what I'm also very positive about is that for the last 8 weeks I have had the remarkable privilege of talking to Australians, some of whom didn't vote for us, some of whom did. But what I've gathered in the last 8 weeks is that there's a large proportion of Australians who are exhausted by the partisanship. They're willing to vote for one or the other, or indeed a third party, but they want to see people keep their promises, say what they mean and mean what they say. I know that our policies, in particular, saving Medicare, not going ahead with the cuts to the Liberals, properly funding our schools, making sure that working class and middle class families get a fair go, not having $100,000 degrees, making sure that we take real action on climate change, making sure we make marriage equality a reality. Australians have responded well, and I always thought they might. Last question, thanks. Sure.
On the result here in Victoria, your gains haven't been as strong here as elsewhere, and obviously there's still counting to be done. Was there any part of you that went back to the hotel last night and felt like kicking the cat over what had gone on with the CFA dispute?
No. The CFA issue at its heart is a state issue, and the only solution to that is going to be at the state level. I also just care to say, Chip, that Labor in Victoria was just starting off a much higher base. What I'm pleased about is that we've done so well in keeping what we've got. And for me, it's about every state of Australia, and it's about people in this country. We're not arrogant about what's happened. I know that there's a big expectation on Labor to stand up for our Labor values. What I'm most pleased about last night's result is that the Labor Party has again back at the centre of the political process, that we're a force for stability and progress in this country. Labor has got its voice back. People went into that polling booth yesterday all around Australia knowing what Labor stood for. I promised 3 years ago, when I became leader of the Labor Party, that what I wanted to see is that people go into the polling booths at the next election and know what the Labor Party stands for. Not everyone may like it, but what I know is everyone knows what the Labor Party stands for, and I regard that as quite an achievement.